Robert Carter ducked behind a crumbling wall, his heart pounding as he glanced over at Princess Adira. Her eyes, fierce and determined, scanned the war-torn landscape for any sign of rebel patrols. The once grand Andromeda capital was now a chaotic battlefield, with smoke rising from shattered buildings and the acrid smell of burning metal lingering in the air. They had been on the run for days, moving under the cover of darkness, evading capture by mere inches. The betrayal that had forced them to flee the palace still stung, but it had also forged an unbreakable bond between them. Robert had never felt so connected to anyone, let alone an alien princess from a distant galaxy. "We need to keep moving," Adira whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant sounds of explosions. "The Loyalist safe house is just a few blocks away." Robert nodded, gripping his plasma pistol tightly. They moved swiftly and silently through the rubble-strewn streets, shadows among the ruins. Every step was a calculated risk, every corner a potential ambush. Robert's training as a diplomat hadn't prepared him for this kind of warfare, but his instincts had sharpened, his senses heightened by the constant danger. As they navigated through the remnants of a marketplace, Robert couldn't help but notice the resilience in Adira's stride. Despite everything, she remained poised, her silvery hair flowing like a banner of defiance. It was in moments like these that Robert saw not just a princess, but a warrior. Suddenly, Adira halted, raising a hand to signal Robert to stop. She crouched low, her keen eyes fixed on a group of rebels patrolling the street ahead. They spoke in harsh tones, their weapons gleaming under the dim light of a shattered street lamp. "We'll have to find another way," Adira murmured, her voice tinged with frustration. "They're too many." Robert scanned the surroundings, his mind racing. There, he pointed to a narrow alleyway partially hidden by debris. "It looks like it leads around them. It's risky, but we don't have much choice." Adira nodded, and they slipped into the alley, their footsteps silent against the cracked pavement. The walls closed in around them, the narrow space amplifying their sense of vulnerability. As they moved deeper into the labyrinthine alleyways, the sounds of the rebels faded, replaced by an eerie silence. They emerged into a small courtyard, overgrown with alien vegetation. The sight of the lush, bioluminescent plants provided a stark contrast to the devastation they had just navigated. For a moment, it felt like sanctuary. Adira turned to Robert, a rare smile softening her features. "We're close. The safe house is just beyond that archway." Relief washed over Robert, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of unease. "We can't let our guard down yet." As they approached the archway, a sudden noise behind them made Robert spin around, his pistol raised. A shadow moved in the alley, and Robert fired instinctively. The shot illuminated a rebel scout who fell with a grunt, alerting his comrades. "Run!" Adira shouted, grabbing Robert's hand. They sprinted through the archway, the pursuers close behind. The safe house was a nondescript building, its entrance hidden behind a thick curtain of vines. They burst through the door, slamming it shut and bolting it just as the rebels reached the courtyard. Inside, the safe house was dimly lit and sparsely furnished, but it offered a momentary respite. Robert and Adira leaned against the door, catching their breath. The tension between them was palpable, charged with the electricity of their shared ordeal. Adira looked at Robert, her eyes reflecting a mix of exhaustion and admiration. "You saved us back there." Robert shook his head, still panting. "We saved each other. We're a team now, Adira. We'll get through this together." She stepped closer, her expression softening. "I know we will. I trust you, Robert." In the dim light, the intensity of their gazes held a promise of something deeper. Their bond had been forged in the fires of conflict, and now, amidst the chaos of war, they found a moment of peace. "Rest for a bit," Adira suggested, guiding him to a small cot. "We have a long journey ahead." Robert nodded, sitting down and feeling the weight of exhaustion finally catching up to him. As he closed his eyes, he felt Adira's gentle touch on his shoulder, a silent reassurance that they were in this together. The safe house, though temporary, became a haven for the night. They planned their next move knowing that the path ahead was fraught with danger, but with each passing moment, their determination to reclaim the palace and restore peace to the Andromeda Empire grew stronger. In the quiet moments before sleep claimed them, Robert thought about how much his life had changed since arriving in Andromeda. What had begun as a diplomatic mission had turned into a fight for survival, and along the way, he had found an unexpected ally and a deep, abiding love. The night was still and silent, a brief lull in the storm. But in their hearts, Robert and Adira knew that the real battle was yet to come. Together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, their bond unbreakable and their resolve unwavering. Robert stood on the balcony of their temporary hideout, gazing at the sprawling cityscape of the Andromeda capital below. The twin moons cast a silvery glow over the city, their light reflecting off the domed buildings and glistening in the canals that wove through the metropolis like veins of liquid mercury. The rebellion had turned this once majestic city into a war zone, and the nights were punctuated by distant explosions and the hum of patrolling drones. Princess Adira joined him, her presence a comforting warmth in the cool night air. She wore a simple cloak that concealed her royal heritage, but nothing could hide the regal bearing and strength in her eyes. They had grown closer over the past weeks, their bond forged in the crucible of danger and shared purpose. But tonight, an unspoken tension hung between them, born of the weight of their responsibilities and the burgeoning feelings they struggled to balance. "We have to reclaim the palace, Robert. It's our only hope to restore order," Adira said, her voice steady but laced with an underlying urgency. Robert nodded, but the weight of Earth's expectations bore down on him. He had received a transmission from Earth Command the previous night, urging him to abandon the mission if it became too dangerous. The safety of Earth's interests was paramount, they said. But how could he turn his back on Adira and the people of Andromeda, who had placed their trust in him? "Adira," he began, his voice heavy with the burden of his decision, "Earth Command has ordered me to prioritize our interests. They're pressuring me to pull out if things get worse." Adira's expression hardened, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of pain. "And what do you intend to do, Robert? Leave us to fend for ourselves?" The silence that followed was thick with unspoken fears and doubts. Robert reached out, taking her hand in his. "I can't leave you, Adira. Not now, not ever. But we have to be realistic about our chances. We need a solid plan, one that gives us a fighting chance without reckless risk." She squeezed his hand, her resolve unwavering. "Then we fight smart. We gather every ally we can find, we use every resource at our disposal, and we do it together." Together. The word hung in the air, a promise and a challenge. Robert felt a surge of determination. They would face this head, on, united in purpose and heart. They spent the day strategizing, mapping out their approach to retake the palace. Adira's knowledge of the palace's defenses and Robert's tactical acumen complemented each other perfectly. As the plan took shape, they reached out to their network of loyalists, rallying support for the final assault. Messages were sent through encrypted channels, calling for a coordinated effort to strike at the heart of the rebellion. Night fell, and the campfire burned low. Robert and Adira sat close, the warmth of the fire mirrored by the warmth of their growing intimacy. The gravity of the situation had stripped away any pretenses, leaving only raw emotion and unspoken truths. "Robert," Adira said softly, her voice a whisper in the night, "I never imagined finding someone like you in the midst of all this chaos. You've become my anchor, my hope." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumb tracing the delicate line of her cheek. "And you, Adira, have become my reason to fight. For you, for your people, I'll face any danger." Their lips met in a tender kiss, a silent vow of love and loyalty. The night seemed to hold its breath, the stars above bearing witness to their unspoken promises. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet of the forest and the impending storm of battle, they found solace in each other's arms. As dawn approached, they broke camp, their resolve steeled for the task ahead. The path to the palace was fraught with peril, but they moved with purpose, their hearts and minds aligned. The journey was a test of their courage and commitment, each step a testament to their unyielding bond. When they finally reached the outskirts of the palace grounds, The sight of their assembled allies filled them with renewed hope. The Loyalists, armed and ready, awaited their signal. Robert and Adira exchanged a final, resolute glance, their love and duty intertwined. The once grand halls of the Andromeda Royal Palace were now a battlefield. The marble floors, once pristine and polished, were scarred with the marks of combat. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and the distant sounds of clashing weapons and desperate cries. Robert took a deep breath, his gaze meeting Adira's. In her eyes, he saw the same determination that had carried them through every challenge, every hardship. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady despite the tumultuous emotions raging within him. Adira nodded, her expression unwavering. Together, they led their loyalists through the maze of corridors, their footsteps echoing in cavernous space. Every corner they turned was fraught with danger, every shadow potentially hiding an enemy. Yet they pressed on, driven by a shared purpose and an unbreakable bond. They encountered pockets of resistance along the way, rebel soldiers desperate to hold their ground. Robert and Adira fought side by side, their movements synchronized as if they had been doing this for years. Robert's blaster fired with precision, each shot finding its mark, while Adira's blade danced through the air with lethal grace. They moved as one, a seamless blend of human ingenuity and Andromedan skill. As they approached the throne room, the heart of the rebellion, the air grew colder, the tension palpable. This was where the final confrontation would take place. Robert's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his focus, his mind sharp. They had prepared for this, planned every detail, but nothing could fully prepare them for the reality of the battle ahead. The massive doors to the throne room loomed before them, a symbol of the power and legacy of the Andromeda Empire. With a deep breath, Adira stepped forward, placing her hand on the ancient wood. The doors creaked open, revealing the grand chamber within. It was a stark contrast to the rest of the palace, untouched by the chaos outside. The throne, a magnificent structure of gold and precious gems, sat empty, a haunting reminder of what had been lost. At the far end of the room stood the rebel leader, a figure cloaked in darkness. His eyes, cold and calculating, bore into Robert and Adira with a mix of hatred and disdain. "You've come a long way, princess," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "But your efforts are futile. The empire is mine." Adira stepped forward, her voice strong and clear. "The empire belongs to its people, not to a tyrant like you." The rebel leader laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Brave words, but words alone won't save you." With a signal, the rebel forces in the room sprang into action. The battle was fierce and immediate, a clash of wills and weapons that shook the very foundations of the palace. Robert and Adira fought with everything they had, their skills and determination pushing them to their limits. In the chaos, Robert saw an opportunity. The rebel leader was momentarily distracted, issuing orders to his troops. Seizing the moment, Robert surged forward, his blaster aimed directly at the enemy. But just as he was about to fire, a blast of energy struck him from the side, sending him crashing to the ground. Pain seared through his body, but he gritted his teeth, refusing to give in. Adira's cry of anguish spurred him on. Summoning every ounce of strength, Robert pushed himself up, his vision blurred, but his focus unwavering. He saw Adira locked in combat with the rebel leader, their weapons clashing in a deadly dance. She was holding her own, but she was outmatched in strength. With a final, desperate surge, Robert charged forward. He tackled the rebel leader, the force of the impact sending them both tumbling to the ground. The leader's weapons skittered across the floor, out of reach. They grappled, a brutal struggle of strength and will. The leader's eyes were wild, his desperation clear, but Robert's resolve was unbreakable. In a move born of instinct and training, Robert managed to pin the leader down, his blaster pressed against the man's chest. "It's over," he said, his voice low and firm. "Surrender." The rebel leader's eyes flashed with defiance. "Never." Before he could react, Adira was there, her blade poised above the rebel leader. "This ends now," she declared, her voice echoing through the throne room. "For the Empire, and for our future." With a swift, decisive motion, she struck. The rebel leader's body went limp, the fight draining from his eyes. It was over. The battle that had torn the Empire apart was finally at an end. Exhausted but triumphant, Robert and Adira stood together, the weight of their victory settling over them. The Loyalist forces secured the throne room, ensuring no further threats remained. The palace and the Empire were theirs once more. Robert turned to Adira, his expression softening. She smiled, a mixture of relief and determination in her eyes. Yes, we did. In that moment, amidst the ruins of a once great empire, they found hope. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but they would face it side by side, united by a love and loyalty that had withstood the ultimate test. As they stood in the throne room, the dawn's light breaking through the windows, Robert knew that their journey was far from over, but with Adira by his side, he was ready to face whatever the future held. Together, they would rebuild the empire, creating a legacy of peace and prosperity that would endure for generations to come. The palace courtyard was a hive of activity. Soldiers and civilians alike worked side by side, clearing debris and tending to the wounded. The rebellion had left deep scars, but it had also revealed the strength and resilience of the Andromeda Empire. Robert and Adira moved through the crowds, offering words of encouragement and solace. Their presence was a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, unity could prevail. In the days that followed, Robert and Adira worked tirelessly to restore order. They convened with the remaining loyalists, strategizing ways to stabilize the empire and prevent future uprisings. Robert's diplomatic skills proved invaluable as he negotiated with various factions, ensuring that all voices were heard and respected. His human perspective brought a fresh approach to Andromeda's politics, bridging gaps and fostering understanding. Adira, meanwhile, focused on mending the fractures within the royal family and the military. She held council with her generals, emphasizing the importance of loyalty and integrity. Her strength and wisdom inspired those around her, rekindling a sense of purpose and honor. One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Robert and Adira found a moment of respite in the palace gardens. The flowers, though trampled during the battle, were beginning to bloom again, symbolizing the rebirth of their world. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" Adira asked, her voice soft as she gazed at the stars. Robert leaned back against a stone bench, his eyes tracing the constellations. "I do," he admitted. "For Earth and Andromeda, there's a new chapter waiting to be written. Our alliance is just the beginning. Together, we can achieve so much more." Adira turned to him, a tender smile playing on her lips. "And what about us, Robert? What does the future hold for you and me?" He reached out, taking her hand in his. "Our future is intertwined with that of our worlds. But no matter the challenges ahead, I know we can face them together. You've shown me the strength of your people, and I've seen your heart. That's all I need to believe in what comes next." Their moment was interrupted by a messenger, breathless and urgent. "Princess Adira, Ambassador Carter, there's a delegation from Earth. They've arrived to discuss the new terms of our alliance." Robert and Adira exchanged a glance, a mix of surprise and readiness. The delegation's arrival was sooner than expected, but it was a testament to the urgency and importance of their mission. As they made their way to the throne room, Robert couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. The alliance between Earth and Andromeda was not just a political necessity. It was a beacon of hope for intergalactic cooperation. The scars of war would heal, and in their place, a stronger, united front would rise. In the throne room, the Earth delegation stood, their expressions a mix of curiosity and respect. Robert stepped forward, extending his hand to the leader of the delegation. "Welcome to Andromeda," he said warmly. "We have much to discuss." The talks were intense, but productive. The new trade agreement was forged with mutual respect and understanding. Earth's resources and technology would aid in Andromeda's rebuilding efforts, while Andromeda's advanced sciences and unique cultural heritage would enrich humanity. The partnership was more than an exchange of goods. It was an exchange of ideals, a melding of two worlds into something greater. After the formalities, there was a sense of celebration. The palace, once a symbol of conflict, now resonated with laughter and music. Robert and Adira found themselves at the center of the festivities, their bond a testament to what could be achieved when differences were set aside for a common good. As the night drew to a close, Robert and Adira stood on a balcony, overlooking the revived capital. "This is just the beginning," Adira said, her voice filled with hope. Robert nodded, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Indeed, together, we'll face whatever comes, for our worlds and for us." The stars above seemed to shine brighter, reflecting the promise of a new era. With their hands clasped and hearts united, Robert and Adira looked towards the future, ready to embrace the challenges and joys that awaited them in the vast expanse of the Andromeda galaxy.